just what kind of technical directive actually hits McLaren where it hurts. Kia ora, my name's Kimmy and I talk about Formula One in the world's second worst accent. This year there's been a lot of talk about McLaren's ability to keep a handle on its tyre temps and its deg, as well as their infamous flexi wing. Now, the important thing to note about this whole saga is that McLaren's not actually cheating, not according to the FIA, and unlike IndyCar, where cheating scandals involving one team in particular tend to have a little bit more in the way of teeth because F1 as a series isn't owned by the guy who also owns the team who keeps getting accused of cheating. McLaren is just very good at finding and exploiting specific parts of the regulations and ensuring their cars are at the absolute limit of said regulations without going beyond them. And this is why they're not concerned about the flexi wing changes coming in Barcelona. They've already prepared themselves for it and have been steadily reducing the gap in their flap as the tolerance, according to the rulebook, has been gradually reduced. Now, this has probably had the added benefit of giving them a lot of time to understand the minutiae of how this is going to affect them going forward once the tolerance level is entirely removed. Now, this is why they're not worried, not because they don't have a flexible wing, but because they know that they will be able to meet the requirements when they are implemented. Now, in Imola, things were a little bit different. So according to sources, the FIA issued 2 technical directives in the lead up to the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix, which were only released days before the event. The first one was relating to the plank and the skid blocks, both specific about allowed materials and how the skid blocks are allowed to be mounted to the plank itself. Now, this was allegedly because some teams were figuring out ways to run their cars lower, thus gaining more performance and effectively falsely reducing plank wear, which would then get them through the post-race inspection. The second TD was specifically around tyre cooling systems and clarification of what is and isn't allowed. This was reportedly due to Red Bull requesting said clarification. They really aren't letting this tyre water thing go, despite Piastri's car being fully inspected post-Miami and passing all of the FIA's checks. I would like to apologise for any background noise here. As regular viewers will know, I have thin windows in an old house. Now, McLaren maintains they weren't affected by these technical directives, but is anyone actually going to give an F1 team the benefit of the doubt in this situation? No. Of course not. We're so used to team principals and other high-level personnel using semantics and technicalities to keep their secrets secret. And when it comes to advantages like the one McLaren seems to have this year, those secrets are pretty damn important to keep close to your chest. Now, the tyre water thing has become a bit of a joke at this point, but to the point where McLaren is playing it up so much that it almost feels like a bit of a deflection. Sure, they're not putting water in the tyres, but that doesn't mean that relative humidity of the air doesn't have some kind of manipulation, or they aren't using some other clever trick that's also on the edge of what is and isn't allowed. Now, the same goes for the skid blocks. I don't know about you, but there have been a number of times this season where I've noticed a marked difference in the amount of sparking coming from the McLarens, and to be fair, the Mercedes as well, for that matter, compared to some of the other teams. Now, that in itself isn't me saying that they've gone and figured out a way to get around the regs, but the fact that the FIA had to clarify indicates that somebody's probably been doing it, and I'd hazard a guess that it's the teams who are sparking more and have more yellow dust shooting out from under their floors every time they go over a bump at high speed. And that makes it interesting that Mercedes also struggled with pace this weekend, and McLaren weren't ever really within spitting distance of Max Verstappen despite absolutely dominating last time out in Miami. Now, even if McLaren has found themselves afoul of these TDs, that's not an indictment of them as a team, because this has always been a part of F1. Pushing the boundaries of the regulations is how teams win championships. Braun's double diffuser was the clever technicality they, along with the less competitive Williams and Toyota, exploited at the start of the 2009 season that gave them the jump on the rest of the field early in the year. It meant that despite only winning 2 races from round 8 onwards, their stellar start, not entirely because of but certainly helped along by the diffuser design, had built them enough of a buffer to scrape through with both the Drivers' and Constructors' Championships, even though the money was fast running out. By the time the FIA had declared the development within the rules, and the 7 teams who weren't already using it bolted on their own versions, Braun had already won 6 of the first 7 races and scored 3 1-2 finishes. Before that, McLaren had their famous brake steer system that allowed their drivers to directly manipulate the brake balance and put more force on a specific wheel by having 2 brake pedals. It was technically within the regulations, but as soon as it was discovered, it was banned. And then more recently, Ferrari had their alleged illegal engine in 2019 that to this day has never been confirmed as illegal or what the settlement was for said alleged fuel flow illegality. But this is another example of pushing the boundaries. Ferrari found a loophole that they could exploit. They did it until they were told to stop. And whether or not their supposed punishment being confidential to this day has anything to do with a conflict of interest on the part of a certain Jean Todt, well, it's still a topic of conversation. And I could lead into a whole nother thing going on with that, but I won't. This video is about the TD, not Signs the Elder. Regardless, whether or not McLaren was exploiting either of those gaps in the regulations probably won't come to light until somebody gets fired and publishes a memoir after their NDA expires. But in the meantime, it's adding to the story of the season. And even if Imola was an outlier, it gives us a little bit of hope that this year won't be the runaway success for McLaren that so far it's appeared to be. If you enjoyed this video and you're not already subscribed, please click that sub button and the thumbs up so that YouTube recommends you more of my stuff. Here's a couple of random things for my channel that YouTube thinks you might like. Thanks for watching. Ka pai.